Tucker said it's not about the Jews. Tucker said it's not about the Jews. It's not the Jews, no way, no how. I don't think Tucker thinks that now. Oh, yes, it is. It is about the Jews. Oh, yes, it is. It is about the Jews. The Colonel said it's not about the Jews. The Colonel said it's not about the Jews. It's not the Jews, no way, no how. I don't think the Colonel thinks that now. Oh, yes, it is. It is about the Jews. Oh, yes, it is. It is about the Jews. Well, one man said that it's about the Jews. Right from the start said it's about the Jews. D. Michael Jones said all along. He wrote the book, he sang the song. He said it is about the Jews. He said it is. It is about the Jews. The professor said it's not about the Jews. Muhammad said it's not about the Jews. It's not the Jews, no way, no how. I don't think Muhammad thinks that now. Oh, yes, it is. It is about the Jews. Oh, yes, it is. It is about the Jews. Scott Ritter said it's not about the Jews. Scott Ritter said it's not about the Jews. It's not the Jews, no way, no how. Scott Ritter knows much better now. Oh, yes, it is. It is about the Jews. Oh, yes, it is. It is about the Jews. One man said that it's about the Jews. Right from the start said it's about the Jews. He, Michael Jones, said all along. He wrote the book, he sang the song. But it is. It is about the Jews. He said it is. It is about the Jews. The whole world knows that it's about the Jews. The whole world knows that it's about the Jews. It's not all Jews, as Jones explains, but it's the Jews. The fact remains it is a Jew. 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 It is about the Jews. It is a Jew. It is about the Tucker said it's not about the Jews. Larry said it's not about the Jews. It's not the Jews, no way, no how. The Colonel knows much better now. Yes, it is. It is about the Jews. Oh, yes, it is. It is about the Jews. The professor said it's not about the Jews. Scott Ritter said it's not about the Jews. It's not the Jews, no way. Well, from Augusta, Maine, the capital city and home to St. Michael's Parish. This is Michael Heath with MSH Live, broadcasting on Saturday morning, November 15th, to the worldwide internet. And we've been watching and listening to a brand new song out of Duck Street Studios in England, London, England, and titled "It's Not About the Jews." It's not about. It is about the Jews. Well, it is about the Jews, right? That's the title of the song. It is about the Jews. We're going to be talking a little bit about that with my guest this morning as we get started. That was a different sequence of production for me. So, as I say every day, thank you for your patience as I learn how to do this with StreamYard Live. So, as is my custom, let's get started by praying the St. Michael prayer, which was prayed in Catholic churches up until shortly after Vatican II, written by Pope Leo XIII, the namesake of the current Pope, Leo XIV. He picked that name in honor of the 19th century Leo, who wrote this prayer to the angel of war. Isn't it interesting that the Catholic Church chose to name the parish in Augusta, Maine, the political capital of our great state, after the angel of war, St. Michael's Parish? And then it also brilliantly built a masculine cathedral on the high ground, which the French laborers owned as they immigrated into Augusta, Maine, called St. Augustine's, which very much
aesthetically honors the masculine. And then they built St. Mary's in the Valley, which very much honors in granite the feminine. And so thank you to the Catholic Church for giving Maine that patrimony as a gift. It's these are two gorgeous buildings, the two most beautiful buildings in our state capital. So pray with me to the angel of war that we don't end up in anything beyond political war. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray, and do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. I'm going to bring in my guest, very honored to have him, mostly because he is 29 years old. John, thanks for joining me so early in the morning, 6 o'clock.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. So you are, and I've heard your name a lot the past year, because you are an up-and-coming political figure. And one of the, I got a kick out of, who was it? It was Matt Gagnon yesterday or something on Facebook says, you're all about clicks and likes there, John Salomon. You're all about clicks and likes. That's why you're taking on the neoconservative establishment, apparently. I think that's part of what you're doing. If it isn't what you're doing, it's certainly happening without your intent, because you're ticking off the neoconservative establishment, Matt Gagnon, namely the Maine Policy Institute, I think it's called. And then, of course, they own and operate the Maine Wire, which is Big Steve 207, I think is his title, or whatever his handle on X. So you're a fighter, and I love that. I love that, because I was a lobbyist for 20 years under the dome, and I gained a lot of respect for all the men and women under the dome who fought for what they believed in, no matter which side they were on. So anyway, I'll stop talking. Thanks for being here. God bless you for what you're doing. And what'd you think of that song? It is about.
Well, it was very interesting, very provocative. It's a great way to start us off this morning. Who was that by? Who was the artist there?
It's called Duck Street Studios. It's out of London, England. And I've not met the creator, the man who runs the shop there, but I don't know if he has a team. But I know one thing he does is he, besides create online content, is he goes to Speaker's Corner in London. You've probably heard of that. And
yes.
he exercises his free speech talking about the Jews in London, England, which you can imagine probably doesn't earn him a lot of plaudits, right?
Yeah, he may end up behind a jail cell for that.
That's right. I mean, given the fact that they're rounding up people for Facebook posts.
Well, exactly. Yeah, I think they've arrested more people than in Russia for Facebook posts. I believe they've jailed 2,000 or 3,000 people a year for social media. So it's a dangerous environment.
In London, England. And it's coming here, isn't it? If we don't do something.
Absolutely.
So, you're 29. Do you know who Nick Fuentes is?
I do. I saw his interview with Tucker Carlson very recently.
Oh, good. You watched it. I didn't. I've watched so much of Nick over the years and so much of Tucker over the years that I haven't taken time yet to watch through that 2-hour interview. But of course, it became the buzz of the internet. What's your take on it?
Well, I thought it was very interesting. And I think the whole reaction to that interview was the most interesting part of all of this, because the neocons were very upset. They were calling for Tucker Carlson to be censored. They were calling for him to be ostracized from the conservative movement, which I don't agree with at all. And we saw the president of the Heritage Foundation make a statement defending Tucker and then reversing course and apologizing for it later on. So there really is a civil war right now within the Republican Party that I would describe as between the old school, old guard, neoconservative libertarian right wing, and this new school paleoconservatism, the Buchananites, the America First crowd, which I would say I'm firmly in the latter category.
Yeah, me too. I regret not doing more to support Pat way back when he stepped up to defend those ideas. Whatever, that was ancient history, but it's still alive. It's more alive today, I think, in a slightly different form, because even Pat couldn't name the Jew, so to speak, which is becoming a marker for the youthful paleoconservative voice in Maine and America. To me, it's a willingness to go there, a willingness. For example, you didn't turn off your camera and your microphone and go away when you heard the song. I mean, 5 years ago, you might have, right? If you wanted to have any hope of being taken seriously in your district. So things are changing, and you got Candace, you got Tucker, you got Charlie Kirk before he was killed, you got Nick, all talking very openly about it, and they're not alone. There's hundreds, thousands more who have lesser sized audiences who are having the same conversation online.
Yeah, well, I think as Catholics, we have sort of a unique perspective on this, because we believe in supersessionism. We believe that the old covenant was destroyed and it was replaced and superseded by the new covenant, the eternal covenant with Jesus Christ. And that old covenant that was specific to the Jewish people and Israel has been replaced by the new universal everlasting covenant through Jesus Christ, his church, and the Eucharist that anybody can participate in through the sacraments. So I think that as Catholics, we have a unique perspective on this, and I think it's the correct perspective on this. I think that we need to welcome everybody into the church. We need to advocate for conversion when possible, and I think we need to try to bring as many people into the Catholic Church as possible. Right,
and that's one of the reasons that I entered the church in 2020 is according to the dogmatic teaching of the church, what makes you a Christian is water baptism. So if you're a sinner, welcome to the club. What sets you apart is not whether you're perfectly sinless. What sets you apart in terms of your Catholicity, your Christianity, is the fact that you entered into Christianity through water baptism. And that's obviously very literally biblical, and all of us. So come on in, no matter what your sin, and join the club. Jew, gay, straight, it doesn't matter. Just get baptized, join the club, and start working out your salvation with fear and trembling. Did I get that pretty much right? You've been Catholic a lot longer than I have.
I think so. Yeah, I was a cradle Catholic, and I grew up in a progressive household. So I went to Catholic school. I was confirmed in the first grade when I was 6 years old, and I attended church up until probably 7th grade when I was a teenager. And I'd be going to church with my family, and this was right around the time that where the gay marriage issue began to come into fruition. And at that point, my parents, who were progressive, ended up pulling us out of the church because the clergy was going against the progressive vocation of getting gay marriage legalized and this whole liberalization culture. And so it took me a while to get back into the church. I only started going back and receiving the sacraments again about a year ago, but I have a newfound appreciation for that as an adult, and learning about the heritage and the church fathers and all the history that goes into it. And really this spiritual conflict that we've been thrust in today, this 2,000-year-old conflict, since Christ's crucifixion. It's, something that is very important, that I think people understand what's actually going on here.
You produced a video. I'm not going to try to search it out, but I'll let you speak to it. It's on Facebook. I don't know if it's publicly available, but is it shared with everybody? Anyway, it's the video about your views on Christianity in Maine. It was you produced and published it in early August. Can people go see it on Facebook?
Yeah, that's a public video. So basically what I was talking about in that video is that less than 50% of Maine is now Christian. We've fallen below that halfway threshold. So we're now a minority in the state of Maine, whereas we used to have a vast majority, 80, 90% of the state used to identify as Christian of various denominations. And because of that, even though we had these different sects, we would come together and have a similar moral core, a moral compass, a North Star, so to speak, when it comes to our morality and how that informs our governance, how that informs our law. And now that half or more than half of the state has fallen into secularism, into atheism, and has rejected Christianity, we see the fruits of that firsthand. We see the results in our school systems through the pride flags. We see the result with the school-based health clinics and the transgenderism, the radical feminism. And we see the rise in sectarianism, hyperpartisanship, the parties being at each other's throats. And I believe that's a manifestation primarily of the decline in Christianity. We don't have that shared moral compass anymore that we used to have, because we used to be able to disagree on a lot of things politically, but we could at least agree on some of the core tenets of Christianity, and we can't rely on that anymore.
Right. And God only knows, literally, how this gets fixed, since we've entered into territory that Maine has never lived in, politically and culturally and religiously speaking, since the first, as you pointed out in that video, 1604, when the first French Christian missionaries showed up in the territory that was then not called Maine, but was then just part of North America, and Europeans were coming here, and of course the Native Americans were around the place in much lower numbers, of course, than what became of European settlement. The numbers grew after that quite a bit. So we've entered into new territory. We've never been here politically, culturally, or religiously to be below 50% identifying as Christian. What's your thinking about the future? Do you think? I mean, a lot of my Protestant and evangelical friends think that what's got to happen is a revival of Christianity. We've got to have tent meetings, and people have got to get saved, and we've got to see those numbers go up through conversion, through that kind of conversion. What's your thinking about the future? Do you see a potential for that happening? I mean, that happened during the Great Awakening in the 19th century. It's happened a few times in America. That sort of revivalistic spirit has bumped up the numbers again and caused maybe a kind of piety to grow somewhat. Do you see that potential in the near or midterm here for Maine?
Well, we need to have a revival of Christianity in the state, because, as I said, if we don't, then we're going to tear each other to shreds. We're going to tear each other apart. And there's a few ways that you can encourage that, but ultimately people need to be saved themselves. They need to come to, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force him to drink. You can't force people to accept the truth of Jesus Christ. So I think there's some ways culturally and legislatively that we can help encourage an environment that promotes those sorts of values. But I don't think you can necessarily force it. Like, you can't establish a state religion. You can't do certain things that would overstep the bounds of separation of church and state. But things that you can do, for starters, is you can, for instance, ban pride flags from public schools and public buildings as a religious symbol. You can actually get back to secularism in the school systems, at least, because what's happening now is that Christianity is being replaced by this new radical progressive religion on the left. And that's exactly what it is. These pride flags, they are a religious symbol. And people need to understand that when you're flying those in a public school, or in, for instance, in Portland, Maine, their new children's museum, they have a whole section on pride flags. That's wrong. That is a religious symbol. It helps indoctrinate children into this new school ideology. And I think that needs to end. So I think that's one factor that we can legislate against that would help encourage a positive environment and that Christian moral system. But number two, I think we need to be better about producing media. We need to produce high quality media. And a lot of the young people are doing this, that basically encourages and venerates our heritage in Christianity and shows people, because a lot of people that I know have rejected Christianity without really understanding what they're putting aside. They're rejecting not only, the religion of their parents or their grandparents or whatever, they're rejecting their whole bloodline. They're rejecting 2,000 years of history leading back to the Roman Empire, to the Byzantines, to the Holy Roman Empire, to Catholic Europe. They're rejecting their whole birthright. And I don't think they necessarily realize the extent to which that affects them and affects their community and affects their country ultimately. So I think we need to educate people through high quality produced media. And I think that will be effective. And it has been effective. You see a massive revival of Catholicism in Gen Z right now. And it's a great thing to see. And I think that we need to keep up getting young people involved in the church.
Back on Nick Fuentes, a big part of his narrative is this racial piece. He defends whiteness. What's really, and I want you to address that. You want to address that point directly? I wanted to qualify it a little. Let me qualify it just a little bit. So
Sure.
One of the things that attracted me to Nick years and years and years ago was the fact that he is best friends with Ye, the black rapper. And so that was curious to me, him being a youngster and Ye being much older and also being black, and Nick maintaining this white, identity politics and defending it. But he defends it with some of his best friends, even in public life and online, being black people. There's a guy I haven't taken time to go down that rabbit hole, but a guy named Sneeko, I guess he has a huge audience, black, and he and Nick are pretty tight, pretty close. So to me, as a boomer, right, with the old post-World War II black-white racial narrative, it sort of emblazoned in my consciousness. Nick broke that in me. He busted that, and So what's your take on all that?
Well, I think it's important to qualify this by saying that I believe that everybody is equal under the eyes of God. As Catholics, we do believe in a universalist vision for heaven, and I think that because of that, we believe that everybody is ensouled by the Creator. We don't believe that some people are inherently better than other people because of their race or because of their genetics. But I do think it's important to point out that there are differences between different racial groups. There's differences between different nationalities and ethnicities that are inherent and genetic. And I don't think that we should be afraid to point that out because it's a fundamental reality. And those things need to be addressed when considering how to structure our society, and understanding the truth about those differences will lead us to actually creating a better and more harmonious world, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Right. So would you be like 100% in agreement with Nick on his racial views to the extent you understand his views on that?
I wouldn't say that I'm 100% with him. I listen to Nick maybe a couple times a week, kind of the same way that I'll listen to Tucker Carlson or Steve Bannon, Alex Jones, Matt Walsh. I don't agree with everything any of them say, but I think it's important to hear a wide range of ideas. So yeah. I think his views are interesting. I think they're worth being heard and considered, but I wouldn't say that I'm 100% in alignment with anything that any of those figures say. Sure.
Yeah, that's fair. I feel the same way. So it's I'm interested in so I haven't mentioned this to my audience, but you are running for office right now. So you're raising money. I noticed on your website that you're inviting people to give you $100. So I'm are you going to run clean, or are you running self, whatever they call it, privately funded, I guess?
I'm running Maine Clean Elections. So right now I'm gathering seed money up until January when we switch to gathering qualifying contributions, which are $5 checks from people in district. But right now, anybody in the world actually, or it might only be in the United States. I don't know. I haven't checked because nobody international has tried to donate to me, but anybody in the United States can donate $100, up to $100 to my Senate campaign to help kickstart my efforts to get into office, to help me buy things like signs and mailers and that sort of thing, digital media that helps me kickstart my campaign and beat Henry Ingwerson, who's the primary opponent for me. Well, not the primary opponent, but he's the incumbent Democrat. So I'm going to need to beat him in the general election. I don't have a primary opponent as a Republican right now. There's also another gentleman running. His name is Jason L'Italian. He's an independent from Biddeford, so-called independent, but he supports heavily subsidized housing, which has destroyed the city of Biddeford. So I very much oppose the things that, or at least that part of his policy. So yeah, I have a couple opponents that I got to beat. And right now we're gathering seed money, and then we will progress into gathering qualifying contributions until we qualify for Maine Clean Elections.
So one of your priorities, and when I first saw your name, it was attached to electricity energy policy in Maine, and I noticed on your website that that's a high priority for you, and it recently got you into a little bit of a online hair tangle with Steve Robinson at the Maine Wire, and then Matt Gagnon piled on, I think, yesterday, and that would be Steve's boss, right?
Yes.
And both of them are coming at you because of your position on energy, right? On electricity. Is that right?
It's for many different reasons. It's because of my position on energy. It's because of my position on Bobby Charles. It's because I am calling out their corruption and their bias. You know, and the big reason why they're after me is because they're clearly trying to maintain narrative control over the GOP primary right now. That's obviously what's going on here. They have a big Bobby Charles bias, whether they want to admit it or not. They're constantly retweeting and sharing and pushing him way more than any of the other candidates. And they need to be called out on that. And they're frustrated with me because I'm battling them for narrative control, and they're not used to that. They're used to being the only game in town, so to speak.
That's an excellent point that I hadn't. I saw you make that point when you were responding to Robinson's criticism of you. You talked about the narrative control point. That's interesting. So you've noticed that Charles is being favored by the Maine Wire and by
100%.
By the Maine Policy Institute.
They'll never admit to that, but that's exactly what's going on here. And they're going to bat for him almost as a surrogate. You know, when I put out my recent video on him, Steve Robinson shared that and or he didn't share the video. He shared a screenshot basically saying, I'm full of it. And was signaling to his audience that I shouldn't be listened to, that I'm not credible.
Yeah, he attacked you personally. I did want to bring that up because he, in his attack, he publicly stated in kind of what came across to me as a kind of paternalistic way, given the age separation between the two of you. I think Big Steve's probably, 40 maybe? Late 30s, 40?
I think he's in his late 30s, yeah.
Yeah, and it came across to me when I read his criticism of you as paternalistic, because what he said is, well, I've talked to you privately and I've tried to educate this youngster who's wet behind the ears politically, and what you need to do, because he won't listen to my very politic advice, is you need to mute him on social media. In other words, you need to stop listening to this guy, which I don't think that was the smartest thing for Big Steve to say, since he's the publisher of this Maine Wire, which is trying to, which represents itself as the place where we love free speech and we're going to be fair and yada, yada, yada. So.
Well, he's a master at crafting narratives and narrative control. You know, he went through this whole pipeline because he went to Bowdoin College and he wrote for the student newspaper. He graduated in 2011 and he was immediately recruited to go to a company called Regnery Publishing in Washington, D.C. I believe he worked there. And then he moved on to Human Events. And those companies, if you know anything about them, they were founded by the Institute for, what is it called? The Intercollegiate Studies Institute and the Congress for Cultural Freedom through William F. Buckley, and this whole CIA network that was birthed through seed money from the CIA through Buckley during the early Cold War. So these institutions are like the old guard neoconservative intel pipelines that, you know, precocious young conservatives are put through and taught how to do this type of media gatekeeping, how to craft narratives. And that's exactly what I believe Steve Robinson is trying to do right now. He's trying to control the narrative. He's trying to take back narrative control and be really the arbiter of truth in the conversation. And the thing about him that I think a lot of people need to realize is what he's constantly doing is he is whipping up the GOP base with nationalist rhetoric, with sometimes even semi-racialist rhetoric. He sounds, you know, based or red-pilled, but at the end of the day, he is always going to deliver the base back to the GOP plantation. He's always going to deliver us back towards establishment candidates, people like Bobby Charles, who align with the national donor networks more than they align with the actual Republican voters. And so for that reason, I call him a fake nationalist. He's a fake populist. He sounds all these things. He sounds kind of mirroring back to the base what they want to hear, but then he's steering them at the same time back towards the political establishment. And I think that's very deceptive.
I couldn't agree with you more. I without really knowing it, became that kind of a figure. I felt all those pressures. When I was executive director of the Christian Civic League of Maine, I felt all those pressures from the GOP. I think what saved me and ultimately made me into a FedEx driver instead of a political figure was the fact that I always took seriously the fact that the Christian Civic League of Maine was founded in March 29th of 1897. One of its founding principles was to be nonpartisan. And so I held to that as best I could, but all the pressure politically within the institution, within the Christian Civic League of Maine, came from those forces, from the forces that have shaped Steve Robinson and made him into this narrative control figure. And I was saved from becoming that, unbeknownst to me, because I wouldn't, number one, become partisan, and number two, I wouldn't give in to the idea that sexual orientation should be added to the Human Rights Act, even after it was accomplished as a result of an enormous amount of spending coming from outside of Maine, which is the same thing that you're fighting today on the electrical issue, is the influence on public policy by very, very, very powerful and rich, wealthy forces from outside of Maine. And that's what happened on that issue before your parents took you out of the church as a result of me. I'm not, not that it's my fault personally, but I mean, for those 20 years, I had to bear the responsibility of being the Protestant evangelical voice in politics for Christianity. And the group, to its credit, decided that we needed to stop the gay movement, the pride flag movement that you're talking about today. Back then, the debate was over adding sexual orientation to the Human Rights Act. And the group, the Christian Civic League of Maine, with no support, by the way, from the Chancery in Portland, from the Catholic Church, no official support whatsoever, ever on any point, no support at all from them, which is why your parents ended up being marinated in progressive, as you call it, ideology within Christianity, within the church, to the point where they became so exercised over civil marriage, being destroyed and obliterated in Maine, that they left the Christian church, which still to this day and will always forever, because it's part of the deposit of the faith, teach that marriage is between a man and a woman exclusively, and that everything the sex outside of that is all fornication or adultery, or it's immoral. It's all immoral words. But anyway, they ended up being deceived even within Christianity, within the church, because of this weakness. And I give the Christian Civic League of Maine all the credit in the world for standing up and waging that battle as long as it did, and ultimately losing. And then, of course, the Marxists tagging me with it. Mike Heath, he's the only guy in Maine that believes that. Of course, I never believed that. So,
well, you got to consider what's going on at the time too, because Barack Obama had just gotten into office, and it was so interesting. I point this out all the time, but you got to consider Barack Obama in 2008. A lot of people don't remember this. Was campaigning against gay marriage in 2008. He said in an interview before he got elected, he said, "I believe marriage is between a man and a woman, and I would not support gay marriage." He said that in 2008, less than 20 years ago. And now look where we're at. We have men playing in women's sports. We have school-based health clinics. We have indoctrination in the schools, pride flags everywhere. We really have the culture has been liberalized so quickly. And a lot of that is because of the corporate media and Planned Parenthood and all the money coming in and the propaganda. And I understand why the culture went in the direction that it did, because these forces were the news, the corporate press, were all pushing in this one direction, this progressive direction. And the propaganda was very strong. It was very strong, with the Obama movement, change, yes, we can, very strong ethos and movement. And a lot of people got swept up in that. And now I think we can look back and safely say a lot of that was a mistake.
Yeah. And I think that this recent history can really embolden movements and leaders like yours. I see it. I see the young men, the 20-something, early 30-something young men that I'm exposed to online, very much entering from the sort of red pill side of things into the political, and starting to think more deeply than they ever have about how to fix this nightmare that they find themselves living in. Because many of them realize or feel deeply, nobody knows the future, but they feel deeply like they're never going to have retirement, they're never going to buy a house, they're likely they're going to face employment. They're facing an employment future which is very uncertain at this point, with promises of UBI and all the layoffs in tech and all this kind of stuff. So,
well, that's why energy is so foundational to me, because it's literally the foundation of our economy. If we can't get energy under control, we're not going to have a job market. We're not going to have manufacturing. We're not going to be able to reindustrialize our society and bring back those high-paying jobs. So that's why energy policy is such a focus for me, Michael, is for that reason. It's the future.
You're absolutely right. One of the points I've made many times over the years is recently started to make the point that that World War III started in 2020, and that the battle space is the internet. And what is the foundation of the internet? It's electricity, right? So it's the movement of electrons. What happened in the late 19th century is humanity discovered the movement of electrons and figured out how to harness and use that power that is somehow related to the movement of electrons. And that's a question in physics that I have thought about, but I haven't been able to figure out. I've thought about it, but I haven't been able to figure it out. The fact is that what we're dealing with in the internet is the discovery about electricity. And so you're right. If Maine doesn't fix this energy problem, then everything else is going to become mute, because the internet will. The two are not directly related, the internet and electricity, but they are connected because the internet doesn't work without electricity. And the internet is, if it's allowed to become a surveillance device, then the oligarchs control all the electricity and they make us all into their slaves, and we're constantly surveilled. And so we've lost World War III. We've lost the battle space, which is the internet, to the bad guys, to Satan in my mind. And if we win the internet, I think we're also going to be fixing energy policy. So in my mind, I see the two things linked, even though you might not, or even though they may not be sort of organically or naturally linked. What say you to all those deep philosophical musings on the part of this retired FedEx driver?
Well, I agree with you. And, this is part of the reason why I've gone after Steve Robinson and Matt Gagnon and not necessarily attacked them, but I've called them out because we have a significant ideological rift there. We have some friction because Robinson says that the cause of our rate increases is net energy billing, which could not be further from the truth. Net energy billing was changed in 2019 to include the corporate solar farms, which I don't agree with. That needs to be rolled back to just residential and small businesses like it was in the past. And that has increased our electric rates by maybe 1 or 2 cents a kilowatt hour based on the PUC reporting. The real cause of our rate increases is our lack of sovereignty, is the fact that these multinational corporations controlled by BlackRock, like Iberdrola Group and ENMAX, which is literally the Canadian government. ENMAX is 100% owned by the city of Calgary. It's a public utility of Canada. It owns Versant Power up in the north, and then Iberdrola Group controls central and southern Maine. It's owned 10% by Spain's sovereign wealth fund, 8% by Qatar, and then another 8% by BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. It's a major problem. We have these multinational corporations that are price gouging us and siphoning all the profits overseas. And Gagnon and Robinson will never see it that way. And they'll argue against it. They'll say, oh, it's the wind, it's the solar farms, it's the net energy billing. Yeah, those things are all problems, but they're really minor problems. They're symptoms of the underlying illness, which is the fact that we don't have a nuclear facility. It was shut down in 97 by Angus King's deregulation mandate. And the fact that our grid was sold off to Spain and Canada in 2009. So that's the true underlying problem. And the way to fix that is to build a nuclear plant. It's got to be owned by the people. And that will be the crown jewel of our economic sovereignty. That's how you get residential rates down over the long term. And that's how you reindustrialize and attract manufacturers to come back, is with those cheap power agreements, the long-term energy agreements. And I don't think I'm ever going to see eye to eye with Gagnon or Robinson on that, because Gagnon's a free market maximalist and Robinson takes paychecks from Gagnon. So, he's got an agenda there. So we have a real ideological difference there, a disagreement. And I don't think they're being forthcoming about what that disagreement actually is. They're trying to smear and slander me and say that I'm a liar or a fraud. And the reason that they do that is because they know they can't win the argument. Gagnon won't have me on his show to talk about this issue because he knows he'll lose the argument. I'll make him look like an idiot. And Robinson is the same thing, because he has gone with this angle, with this Peter Mills thing, for example, where he interned for Peter Mills on his gubernatorial campaign in 2010. Robinson has a bias there. And he also is not being forthcoming about the situation. There's a clear conflict of interest where Peter Mills, who's Janet Mills' brother, is sitting on the board of the Western Mountains and Rivers Corporation, in control of millions of dollars and hundreds of acres of land as a result of the MOU they created with CMP in 2017 that was contingent on the CMP corridor being passed, which is Sisters in office, vetoing legislation, doing everything she can do to speed run the permits through. And, that's a clear conflict of interest. And Robinson won't talk about that. He won't be forthcoming about that. And there's an agenda there. There's a reason. There's probably people on that board that he's trying to protect.
So we got a question from a viewer. I'm going to throw it up on the screen. You can read it. Let me know if you can't see that, John. Can you see it?
I can see part of it. It says censuring a board member. What specific aspects?
In the recent Kennebec controversy, you advocate for censuring a school board member over her remarks on transgender policy opponents. What specific aspects? And here's the rest of it. of the district's transgender athlete policy allowing participation based on gender identity do you believe violate Title IX, and how would you amend state law to protect girls' sports?
Well, I would abide by Trump's executive order, which is titled "Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports." I mean, it's a pretty clear distinction there. If you're a biological man, you should not be in women's locker rooms. You should not be in women's bathrooms. You should not be participating in female sports. So I think it's a pretty simple solution. And with that Kennebunk controversy, the only reason I called for Leslie Trontelange to be censured is because she will not retract her harmful and defamatory statement that myself and my colleagues are pedophiles. She said we had pedophilic tendencies and we should be placed on the registered sex offender list. If she retracts that statement, I don't think she needs to be censured. I don't think she necessarily even needs to step down, but she will not apologize and she will not retract her statement. And that's what I have a problem with. But when it comes to the Title IX policy, I would just advocate the state should abide by the Trump executive order to keep biological men out of women's sports, locker rooms, and bathrooms. It's as simple as that.
So David Arthur has another question here. If you don't know David Arthur, I encourage you to make that connection. He's here in Maine, and he lived. Do you know who he is?
I don't.
He lived for many, many years as a woman. He's a man, and he had a come to Jesus moment as he was dying from AIDS on his deathbed. And that was a number of years ago. So he since that time, he's been very boldly speaking out around the country about the transgender issue based on his own personal experiences. So his second question here, the LGBTQ plus movement sees conservative opposition equal to discrimination or erasure. Where do you draw the line between protecting biological sex-based rights and affirming personal identities?
Well, I think that we can approach this issue with compassion, but I don't believe in affirmation of a gender that you were not born into. If you are a biological man and you think that you are a woman, I don't think that we should affirm that. I believe that's mental illness and it needs to be treated as a mental illness. And we can approach that issue with compassion and, not treat these people poorly. They need to be treated with dignity and respect, but we can't lie about who they actually are or the body that they were born into. I think we need to be honest with them. We need to be compassionate, but honest.
Great, thanks. So folks who are watching on YouTube or X can ask questions or make a point, and I will see them. So David responded to you here. Exactly, there's a difference between affirmation versus validation. So nuclear power, you're advocating to build a nuclear power plant that belongs to the people of Maine. Did Maine Yankee, was that owned by the public, or was that a private entity?
Well, it's an interesting situation because back when Maine Yankee was around, CMP was considered a vertically integrated public utility. So while they were technically private, it was heavily centralized and controlled by the state. So CMP owned 40% of Maine Yankee. And when Angus King issued his deregulation mandate in 97, it forced CMP to divest in all their hydroelectric dams, all their energy infrastructure, including their 40% ownership stake in Maine Yankee, which caused the plant to close its doors. So while it was technically a private facility, it was owned by CMP heavily and was regulated by that centralized utility structure versus what we have now, which is this deregulated patchwork where CMP is only a transmission and distribution company. And then all the private equity has come in and bought up all the dams, bought up all the power generation facilities. NextEra Energy is one of the big ones. For example, Seabrook Nuclear Station in New Hampshire, we get a lot of our power from that station. And what they do is it's owned by NextEra, which is heavily invested in by BlackRock, of course. And NextEra Energy sells their power into ISO New England at 5 times the operational cost. And what I want to do is cut out the middleman. If we have our own facility that is owned by our people, then we don't need to sell into ISO New England. We can sell directly into the main grid at cost, which is like 2 cents a kilowatt hour, and not only will that reduce our residential rates significantly, it will also allow us the economic leverage to offer long-term energy contracts to manufacturers. For instance, if Ford, for example, wants to set up a new factory in the United States, they put out the equivalent of an RFP. A lot of people don't understand how this process works. They put out an RFP to, or like a request for price or request for quote, to all these different states, and they determine who has the lowest taxes, who has the least regulation, but most importantly, who has the cheapest energy costs. What state can offer us the cheapest power? And right now, Ohio or Indiana will offer these factories 10 cents a kilowatt hour locked in for 20 years. Maine can't do that. Maine can offer you 30 cents a kilowatt hour, not locked in. So it's that's the number one issue when it comes to reindustrializing our state and bringing back our economic sovereignty and high-paying jobs, is the fact that we don't have any leverage. And I want to give the Maine people leverage through a nuclear facility that is owned by them primarily, rather than these multinational corporations and hedge funds.
So I think a lot of the public is coming to understand through the work of people like Reagan Paul and others that this reliance on wind and solar is ridiculous insanity. Speak to the issue of hydro compared to nuclear, because I hear that a lot, that if we could redam, or if we got over this environmentalist craziness, we could bring our dams back, because we've got these three rivers, and we also have the potential for harnessing tidal power, especially down east near Machias. That's been on the table forever, doing that. Should hydro be in the mix, or why are you pushing nuclear over hydro, or maybe you aren't? Go ahead.
I absolutely believe hydro should be in the mix. I think that should be one of our number one sources. We need a nuclear plant to act as that strong baseload power that is reliable and consistent. But the hydroelectric, I think, should be our number two source of power in the state. We need to dam up a lot of places in the state. I mean, we need to be respectful to our environment and do this consciously, but there are a lot of places where we could be generating massive amounts of power off the dams. For instance, in my town, Hollis, there's a dam over the Saco River, and they just shut it down because the power company wasn't maintaining it. The state was not providing the funds to maintain this dam, and they just shut it down. It's idle right now. And you look over there whenever you cross over the Saco River from Buxton to Hollis, and there's this rusted out dam that has cracking concrete and is on the verge of collapse. If that had been maintained, that would be powering hundreds of homes right now and bringing down our electric rates in the area. But instead, they decided not to maintain that. It was sold off to private equity. They decided it's not worth our money because we have a monopoly on the energy in general. We don't need this dam to lower energy rates for the people. We actually want higher electricity rates. We own the nuclear plant. So, we can profit off this anyways. There's no reason for us to build more dams or to build more energy infrastructure. We already have the market cornered. So that's the big problem, is the private equity has a monopoly on our power infrastructure. And if we can combat that by building dams that are owned by the public, that are owned by the state, and building nuclear plants that are owned by the state, small modular reactors, that is what's actually going to combat this, what I describe as a foreign energy cartel that really has the market cornered in our state and across our country.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. So do you sense that there's any, being an old boomer like I am, when I think of the dam, the immediate thing I think about is, we're going to kill the fish, right? The whole environmentalist argument. Do you see that losing power, staying the same in terms of its influence, or lessening in power and influence when it comes to the issue of specifically generating electricity using dams? What's your sense?
Well, I think we need to cut through the propaganda, and I think people are starting to smarten up when looking at this issue, because the dams, that argument that you made about the fish, there are some cases where that's valid, but there's a lot of cases where that's used as an excuse by a competitor. They fund studies around, oh, we have a dam somewhere else, and we have the market cornered on, electricity. We don't want a competitor coming in and building their own energy infrastructure. So we're going to fund studies. We're going to send money to these colleges to fund studies against the construction of a new dam because there's some fish that will affect their migration pattern or something. I think a lot of that's BS, quite honestly. And I think that we need to be more honest about the situation and say, yeah, there's a trade-off here. Maybe it will interrupt this one fish's migration pattern, but this is going to power 3,000 homes in Western Maine. It's like, well, I think it's kind of worth it in that circumstance.
And
the
then
fish will survive.
Right. The fish will survive. And then I never understood the immediate response from people who in the know to that argument about fish in Maine was the fishways, the ladders, which seems to me to make perfect sense. Yeah, just make it possible for them to go around the dams as they migrate. I don't know. But
there's ways around it.
Yeah. So we got another question here. Last question from David. If elected to the Maine Senate, what's one bill you'd introduce to address the overreach of the LGBTQ plus movement in state policy, and how would it foster unity versus division in District 32?
That's a good question. One policy that I would advocate for and that I would try to get on the floor, as I mentioned, is banning the pride flags from schools and public buildings. And the way that we would frame that to hopefully foster unity, I know there would be pushback to that, of course, but the way that we would frame that is the pride flags are a religious symbol, and we're trying to create a secular environment in our schools. Schools shouldn't have a religious denomination. We don't allow in Maine Bibles or crosses in public schools or classrooms, although I personally don't think that would be the worst thing in the world, to be quite frank. It'd be a better situation than we have currently. But what I would advocate for is a secular-based school system, one that focuses on nationalism and patriotism. And the only flag that should be flown in our public schools is the American flag and the official navy blue state of Maine flag. So that's the way that I would approach that particular issue regarding LGBTQ issues in our district.
What do you think about the idea of, I'm sure you support, well, I shouldn't say I'm sure, getting sexual orientation and gender identity out of the Maine Human Rights Act?
Well, that's kind of what the Title IX law is trying to supersede. Because if you look at, the argument by these school boards right now, they're saying we side with the Human Rights Act because that was validated by the Supreme Court, the Maine Supreme Court, back in, I believe, 2013 is when that verdict came through. And it said that we interpret the Maine Human Rights Act to mean that, sexual orientation is fluid. You can decide what sexual orientation that you are, and that determines what bathrooms you go into and what sports you can play in, etc. And the Title IX law issued by the Trump administration, that interpretation supersedes the Maine human rights law and how that is interpreted. So I believe it's kind of a distinction without a difference, right? You get the Title IX law enforced, then it will override that interpretation, the 2013 Maine Supreme Court interpretation of the Maine human rights law.
John Salamone, thank you so much. This is John's site as we wrap the hour here. You've been so good to get up earlier than you used to be with me this morning. I so appreciate it. John Salamone, I'm pronouncing that right? Salamone, right?
Salamone.
Salamone, okay. And this is his website. I'll make sure it's in the show notes at michaelheath.tv. I am really honored to make your acquaintance on my live stream and look forward to meeting you in real life. And wish you all the best in your campaigning. And I'm especially blessed to have heard your explanation on energy policy. I think You're absolutely right. We have to fix. That's one of the, if not the most important economic issues we face, is getting this electricity thing so that we can compete. I love the point you made about being able to attract Ford, for example, or being able to rebuild our energy base. I mean, it's obvious if we're going to charge 30 cents and Ohio's going to charge 10 cents, what's going to happen, right? As America
Just supply and demand.
reindustrializes,
Exactly.
And we are reindustrializing. That has started, and it's going to continue. It can't stop because we need jobs. So, John, thank you. I'll let you go and then wrap the show. So God bless you, and
God bless you. Thank you, Michael.
Have a great weekend.
You do the same. Thanks so much.
So great show this morning. Didn't see that coming until yesterday. Really blessed that John took time early on his weekend to be with me. I hope you'll share this link around at you can get it at michaelheath.tv. That's the best link, not YouTube or X, because of the censorship. There's so much cancellation and censorship going on that link can't be my thing's telling me something. My old brain gets confused when my computer's talking to me while I'm talking. Appreciate you joining me. Wish you the best this weekend. Join with me in praying the Our Father. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. And I will be back tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. I'm here every morning at 6 a.m. So grab your coffee and come and do some thinking with me about politics and religion and all the stuff that we're not allowed to talk about or think about anymore.